Hello, everyone. Our guest today is Dr. Molly Joseph. She's a professor and poet from Kerala who writes travelogues, short stories, and storybooks for children. Ma'am has published 15 books, of which 13 are poems, a novel, and a storybook for children. She has won several accolades, which include the India Women Achievers Award 2020. She believes in the power of the word and writes boldly on matters that deal with the contemporary. Dr. Molly Joseph had her doctorate in post-war American poetry. She retired as the head Department of English, St. Xavier's College, Aluva, Kerala, and has also retired as Professor Communicative English at FISAT, Kerala. Welcome, ma'am, to the show.
So happy, dear Anita, to be here with you this beautiful evening.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, before we begin, we'd love to hear you read out from one of your books, please.
Okay. So here am I, kick-starting it with a poem of mine from my book, Mina's Musings. Actually, my other name is Mina, and usually I'm a bilingual poet. I write in Malayalam also. So my pen name in Malayalam is also Mina.
Right.
Yes, this is a very important book of mine, for which the foreword was written by K. Sachidanandan, our great poet from Kerala.
Okay, right.
So this is a poem I'm selecting to read because I am a very powerful optimist. Despite all the devastations, the pandemic, wars, authoritarianism, whatever happening around in the world, still there is hope. So this is my poem for you, dears.
Yes,
somewhere in the midst of roaring traffic, a hand reaches out to help an old man cross the road. Somewhere, a kind policeman carries the pregnant lady caught up in hartal. Hartal typical to Kerala, when we go on a holiday. The pregnant lady caught up in hartal, rushing her to hospital. Somewhere, a child bends down to pick up the mud-strewn plastic to put it into the dustbin. Somewhere, the busy commuter turns around, stops to close the tap, oozing water. Somewhere, braving the heat, the woman nurses the sapling, the lone survivor of the giant mother tree that has been cut. Somewhere, leaders meet to work on truce to stop the fight. Hope, the first cry of the newborn, long awaited, distant. Hope, the first cry of the newborn, long awaited, distant. Peace as a promise, like the rain the thundering clouds carry. Peace as a promise, like the rain the thundering clouds carry. Thank you.
Lovely, ma'am. That was so evocative. That was such a beautifully lyrical piece of poem.
Thank you.
So tell me, ma'am, tell me a little about yourself. What made you get into a writing career?
Yeah. I would say, as Gibran puts it in his book, The Prophet.
Yes.
As a child, I had the kind of, the pain of too much of tenderness, I'd say. The pain of too much of tenderness here refers to. Like, when I would read children's stories, I would just identify myself with the characters. There was the story of an elephant who was the friend of a girl who was going that way every day through the forest. She used to give a banana to the elephant, but the girl fell ill, she was missing. The elephant came down the valley in search of the girl. That was the story when I was just in third standard. And then people started pelting stones at the elephant, saying it has come to destroy the village. I couldn't complete the story, the pain of too much of tenderness. I started weeping and crying. And my parents, teacher parents, my father was so good in literature. So he said, you better write down, my child, what you feel. That was the first step towards writing. Later on, in high school or in college, I was contributing to college magazines. Yes, Anita, but then, life's trajectory falls with so many other important priorities.
Yes.
You're busy getting into a job, you're doing specialization, everything. And so many things, children, family, get them married, all those. These preoccupations actually engrossed me. And then I retired as the head of the Department of English and Service College. By that time, the family affairs are all settled, children settled and all. I felt in enormous ease. But in college, I was in charge of college magazine, making it the best magazine of the year from Kerala, that we got it, college magazine, I was the editor. But this full-time writing, I got into, so many people ask me, how, ma'am? Yes, after 55. I felt enormous ease and peace. I believe sometimes it requires, you need a kind of leisure to think, meditate. You can't simply start writing on anything and everything. You need time for it to get digested, for you to work on it, rework on it. That way, I turned into a writer. I started with poetry. And later, I was doing travelogues. I was doing children's stories also. I was a regular contributor to PCM Children's Magazine here. There and I consolidated the whole thing. Adventures of Billu, Dillu, and Thrillu. For some time after writing for the adults, I felt, why can't I write for children? Because it impacts a generation so much, The right kind of inputs you put. It is an adventure story. Thrillu was the magician with whom two of those boys, Billu and Dillu, goes around and then does good things. That is, it is connected with the times we live in, flood hit area. They go, they rescue people. Or they are in love with nature, against killing birds and all. So they start nature club. So relating it to their reality, I was just weaving out a story, and I think it was very popular in schools because teachers, if they wanted to tell them or teach them some kind of this thing, it is not a didactic moral thing. It came through the story and they felt, it was actually, I have two grandchildren. My daughters and sons, they were the characters, Billu and Dillu. So whatever I wanted to tell them, I wanted to tell to the young ones, you foster love for nature, care for nature, animals, everything, and have sharing and all that, Along with adventures in space and all that, with Thrillu, they go to space and explore the different orbits. So what I'm telling you is, everywhere I was trying my hand at whatever little I can do to make the world a better place than I find it. Whether in adult writing, whether in travelogue, even when travelogues helped me a lot to share what I saw there. That was how the trajectory of my writing went off, Anita.
Right. Now, I know you've written a lot of genres, but you're primarily known as a poet.
Yeah.
So why this genre? What's so special about poetry? What attracted you to poetry?
Yeah. Even at childhood, I think it matters most. I told you, my parents are teacher parents. And they were into the habit of reading us on poetry books. Whether it was in Malayalam, Changambula, Malarani Kadugal, Tingi Vingi, in tune they would be, in the lilt they will be bringing the poetry onto us. Later, when it was with Wordsworth and all those, my father was fond of collecting all those. The thing I was fed on, I felt it has a real power in a choice selection of words. Minimal, but maximal effect. Not only cerebral, but emotive. As I told you, I was more onto the emotional part.
Yes.
So that way, I felt poetry was my line because I could say much through less.
Right.
That is the one particularity of poetry as a genre. You know, you needn't elaborate on it. You leave it to the reader, as you said, reader response. Especially modern poetry falls into that line. That is why I picked up for my first, doctorate, William Carlos Williams, the poet. William Carlos Williams, after Eliot, Pound, and all those people, there comes a transformation in the period of the genre of writing. Gone were the times of Milton when it was said that you write on sublime themes, fall of man from heaven. And your style should be like sublime, subtle. But then, with romantics, Wordsworth and all come and say, poet is basically a man speaking to men. That's why we can easily understand the amalgamate Lucy Gray or the daffodils and all that. But then, meter was a very important thing. Within the straitjacket of the meter again, poetry was like, you are putting a crab by cutting off the feelers and fitting it into a box. Sometimes that was what I felt about metrics. You have something to say, but you have to cut off the feelers of the frog to fit it into a box. That is my difficulty. So I opted for free verse, and my poems that I wrote, more or less like the person who was on whom I worked for 7 years, William Carlos Williams. Through a single poem, he became famous, The Red Wheelbarrow.
Yes.
I think we might have heard of it.
Yes,
3-4 lines,
yes.
but it connotes so much. And so many dissertations, interpretations came galore. Much depends on a red wheelbarrow, glazed in rain water, besides the white chickens. That's the poem. And then at one look, you may feel, oh, what is this? No. It shows the enormous juxtapositions of life, animate, inanimate, white, red, everything. It's a great philosophy, like Zen-like philosophy. Everything depends on the way your eyes decide. The eyeing eye matters. What you look at matters. And through your eyes, meaning dawns. Same thing another eye views, and it is another interpretation. So it was like giving a wide berth to objects as such, not polluting it with subjectivity. Look at the wheelbarrow and the white chicken. As such they stand. The poet is not smothering it, covering it with his high subjectivity. So that was the trend I picked up. And naturally, my poems got special attention because through crisp, simple diction, some people called it, when I went to Kenya to present it, they said, it's like ribbon poetry, ma'am. Simple, small lines. I was experimenting with the conventional space constraints. Sometimes it would be one word making one line. It flows like. So then, much I elicit through a comma or a period because it resonates in the psyche of the reader. That is my style. And I got some awards in experimental poetry also. That way. That was how I came to this direction of poetry, and I felt that was my forte.
Right, absolutely. Now, what are some of the subjects you write about in your poems? Is there anything that you focus on, or is it general?
I would say a poet, not that a poet has to be didactic. The poet is, or his thinking should be in consonance with the times you live, especially the times you address, and your take on it, as I said. Share it with others. And in it, especially I say, not that, there was a kind of Eliot period, there was real fragmentation, everything was broken, and, all world confusion. Not that I believe as a poet. We are the torch bearers to the world. As I put it in my poem somewhere, you have to ignite that kind of optimism, because whatever happens around, life goes on. Everything in life, it's a passing phase. Maybe COVID, it is going to die down soon. War, whatever, disease, illness, or ups and downs, vicissitudes, all a passing phase. So what we have to do is to find out the silver lining in the dark cloud. So I dwelt on contemporaneity. Any number of poems. The latest collection that came was, water sings over the stones. It was this COVID time. And then I thought, yes, of course, life is slipping away, but still, wait, we must. I think instead of waxing elected on it, shall I quote a few lines from my poem?
Absolutely, absolutely, ma'am.
That would be more interesting, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Life slips away behind the polished paneling, silently, slowly, white ants eat away the wood. Life slips away. What can linger after you are gone? A thought, a thing, or an idea of a thing? Who cares? Live while you live. Make a wee bit difference. Isn't there a middle world between all fears and hates? How we allow fear to feed hate? Can't we foster a level ground where humans turn humane? Have not hold hands, hug it. Yes, the teeming counters, though disparate, hold promise. The black clouds holding promise. So this is what I think I'm trying to do through my writing.
Right.
And as far as possible, from experience, I do write, because it carries a kind of conviction instead of theorizing.
Absolutely.
So while I was teaching, after being the HOD there in an arts and science college, I came over to FISAT. It's a professional college. I was teaching BTechs, MBAs, and MCAs, English. And I felt they are the people, who are going to be the architects of future. So to put the right insight into them, to give them the right kind of, positive way of social rebuilding, I thought it was necessary. And I found among them any number of students who are very capable in writing, debating, with takes of their own other than simply getting glued to the computer and the technical part. I started something called a literary association called Rolling Stone there. Even now, some of those students who were members of the Rolling Stone, even after retirement, they are in touch. We are a group. They are in different strata of the social ladder. And I think when I got that award, they took all these into consideration. I think India Women Achievers Award. It's not merely writing and simply standing on an ivory castle, but coming to grips with the reality and trying to do what little you can to mold the young generation. Putting in the right inputs, insights in the right direction. That was a flood time in Kerala. And we just adopted a village when these technical students were going over there, electrifying all those dilapidated houses and bringing them back to normalcy. What a sense of satisfaction it was. After that, we had a kind of meeting, the Rolling Stone students, and I asked them, don't you feel the real kind of fulfillment, my dear students? We talk and talk a lot, but we put small, as Wordsworth said, little unremembered acts of kindness. They seemed to carry the spark. They were thrilled, my group of students. So this is how I tried to make my, what I would say, tenure here on earth meaningful. Even after retirement, I'm into all these things.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ma'am, you're a very widely traveled person. So how has that influenced your work?
Exactly. Travel actually opens your eyes like anything. you're rubbing against reality in front of you. And I could say, especially when I told you my Kenyan experience, it was something unforgettable. When they called me, it was a world conference of poets conducted by the reputed Kisii University, Kenya. I never expected it had that much of dimension. 2 weeks we had there with young students who were wonderful poets, especially the colored, campus youth. You could use the other word. They are so much full of potential. And we were just mesmerized by the performance poetry. It's not poetry that is something written and, you look at the book and read it. It comes from their hearts. It had a kind of resilience, like those years of suppression their fathers had undergone. And now how they're getting over it, but not fully out of it, though they have self-government, one tribe after another, getting into power, catering to their few. And then they feel, again, life is meaningless. Fighting and fighting. Like a ball falling down, coming up with resilience. That kind of feel we had. And there, other than that, we presented poems, but we were more listeners and then giving the guidance and all in the workshops. But 2-3 days were meant for the real kind of social reality. We were taken to those Migori tribes and all that tribal areas where these children come to interpret their language for us. We were welcomed in catcalls by these folk Migori group, women only mainly, practically no men. It seemed it was a village bereft of men. Why? I asked them. Men have left for better fortune, but their wives and their children, the poor women are fending for the family. And each family, one poet is taken to one family, and I was taken to one family where I find a young mother, believe me, barely in her 20s, not even to 20. She's pregnant, she's having one child on her hip, another one standing near. And I look at it, her hut attached, like some bamboo poles and then canvas sheet and all. In front there are, she has a little bit of poultry. The mother hen is pecking and giving food to the little chicks. And I felt, what difference this poor girl is doing it. Girls of that age in my college, in FISAT, professionals, they say, ma'am, how boring it was that vacation. Appa didn't take us to the promised place. We didn't have that. This, wallowing in luxury. Compared to that, what is the state of that average girl there? And the elder one standing and saying, he was looking at it with wonder-struck eyes. The young brothers, the campus students were there. And I asked them, ask him, what is his dream? Ask him. He's going to school, she said. He has to walk a long way, but she says with determination, the mother, I'll see that he goes to school, ma'am, because he shouldn't have off it. Yes. And I asked the little one in the primary standards only. And these campus youth interpreted, ma'am, my dream is not to see my mom cry. Because when it rains, cats and dogs, and the thatches will be flown off by the wind, these canvas sheets, she takes up a big blanket and hovers us all around. And she starts weeping. And where is our father? We have no idea. They don't even remember the face of their father who was left for better fortune, got into drugs or whatever. So this is the hardcore reality that strikes me at razor's edge in front of my eye. I come back to my college and I tell my students, see how privileged you are. There are girls, a number of girls, ma'am, we are clamoring for freedom. At midnight, we should have freedom to walk in the street. Okay, fine, my dear. Women sleep, everything, I understand. But see, these are the harsher, rugged edges of life. And these things, while I sit to write, my eyes well up. I can go to the remote level, and I wrote some wonderful poems on that also in one of my collections. Every collection of mine has got travel series, travel poems. I'd been to Bhutan. I had been to China. I'd been to beautiful Switzerland, which taught me how nature has to be kept in all its sanctity. Coming back to Kerala, I felt, what a blessed land is ours. I wrote poems about the way they were keeping each streamlet, how cleanly they were bringing it up, down and collecting it in lake. You can drink it with your own hand, that clear water. Whereas when we go to the places on way to Munnar and all in Kerala, what is happening? All the waste and the dump we deposit into those clear streams. So these are all things that I feel from my experience when I write, it carries conviction. Much of my Malayalam poetry also takes to that.
Right. Ma'am, poetry, if we look at its evolution, at one point it was very popular and everyone loved it. Then at some point, somewhere down the line, it started dying a slow death and people were no longer interested in reading poetry or anything. But suddenly now we're seeing a major revival of interest in this genre. People are more keen to read and write poetry, explore poems. So what is your take on that? And why do you think that is so?
Time is a very important factor these days. Time. The best gift that you can give a person is your time. Likewise. So in this rat race, people go for quick things, something that takes less of time but goes intense and profound and gives you that kind of satisfaction. A poem is a condensed piece. You read a fiction, you have to read the development of the protagonist, how he faces next day, the other next day. It takes time. Whereas you come to an encapsulated poem that saves time but give you the kind of emotive experience of it. One factor. Another, music, poetry. Poetry is making different wonderful blendings, combinations. It goes hand in hand with dance and music. You might have, Anita, you are a Keralite, you might know about that great Cochin Binale.
Yes.
Where both Krishnamacharya and others, they are experimenting on the avant-garde, different genres. You get into a kind of a hall where you can hear all the sounds. There is photography, installation, poetry, painting, everything. Poetry mixes, gels like anything with any kind of media. And these days, with internet, internet has helped it a lot. The spurt in poetic production. For example, a Punjabi girl, Ruby Kaur, just 21-year-old. She's in Canada now. She was the daughter of a cab driver. She, through her Insta poems, shot up into fame. And now they say that New York Times says her books, first book was Insta Poetry Collection, Milk and Honey, sells like anything more than Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. See? So the thing is, at the click of the mouse, you access the poet. You know it. Social media gives it so much. Again, another trend is, as I told you, there are two groups even now in contemporary. I go for lectures on contemporary trends in poetry. One is like the conservative group still, but practicing in conversational talk. The other is the experimental group, playing with sounds, repetition of sounds, bringing it closer to music or even to dance. Even in Malayalam that is happening. So the power of the sound matters in poetry. You can do it in fiction. You can do it in another genre. So the musicality you give it, and the tangible feel, you can touch and feel when the poet is bringing it out, other than a thing on the page, and the poet reads it, it gets flesh and blood. So these kinds of things, I believe, gives that special popularity to poetry. And again, one more trend. These are days when world is growing into a global village. We come across any number of poetry groups. Yesterday I was attending Panorama Literary Fest. Oh God, it had brought the whole globe together, poets. Different languages. You can translate it You can present it as such, and it focuses on the indigenous part of that culture. Every culture becomes important and becomes assimilated into the global culture. That is a trend now. Instead of personhood, personality, it becomes more on personhood. You belong to India, then what is it? An Indian element. Not that I am for a kind of narrow way of looking at these kind of nationalisms. I believe all are important. There is nothing like being an Indian, being a Chinese, nothing like that. But now we have developed a kind of flexibility where we can accommodate all that. And a new cult is being fostered by contemporary trends in modern poetry. Maybe these are the reasons as far as I look at it. There can be other reasons also.
Right. Now, since you deal a lot with modern day poetry, how do you think, I mean, some of the features of modern day poetry, how are they different from poems that were written earlier, more traditional, conservative poetry?
Yeah. Earlier, it was like words of saying poetry is spontaneous or powerful feelings. Or in later, that is how when he walked around and saw the daffodils dancing, suddenly he felt like writing, but then he comes back later. He lies down in his couch and he says, oft on a couch I lie, in a vacant and pensive mood, they flash upon my inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. So he reframes the definition saying, poetry is emotions collected in tranquility. Okay, that is romantic period. But when we come to the later period with Eliot and all, he said, poetry is an escape from personality, not an expression of personality. He says something like, we have to objectively look at it. I mean, present the situation as such and leave it to the reader. That's what Wasteland is all about. A heap of broken fragments. How each picture shows how decadence sets in. Like the young typist Carbuncular, you might remember, Anita, it is a wonderful poem, where the young typist, after her mundane activity comes, gets into the room, and she brushes her hair. She puts on the gramophone, and she looks at the watch. It seems she has a visitor. And then she goes and changes. Brushes up her face as if waiting for him. Knock on the door. There the man comes. No conversation. Out they go into the bed. Have it. Even sex, the very creative thing, becomes a matter of a perfect reactivity. She comes back, washes her face. He puts on his dress. He leaves. And then she comes, goes to the fridge and takes that, that cool drink part of it, that packaged thing. And then she zips it, brushes her, looks into the mirror, puts on the gramophone. Decadence with every kind of relationship. Decadence with mechanization, the fridge thing. Even with the primary, very creative, man's faculty like that of sex became something mundane, something perfect. How well it is depicted. Later, what happens is, we come to Pound, Ezra Pound, successor of Eliot. He says, he brought in imagism. You bring an image, an intellectual and emotional complex in an instant of time. A 1 or 2 line poem he writes, which becomes so historical. These are the 2 lines. In a station at the metro. That's the caption. With these poems, the first line is the caption title. In a station at the metro. Faces in the crowd. Petals on a wet blackboard. Faces in the crowd. Petals on a wet blackboard. Later, many a time I was standing in Dadar in Mumbai, looking at the medley, the mix of people crowding along. This poem resonated. How many faces? Rich, variegated faces. One so different from the other. Like petals on a wet blackboard. Then I could know it intensely. How can there be petals on a wet black bow? Usually you expect petals in a green bow. That is the, what you call, juxtaposition of the opposites. That is life. Full of happiness on one side, suddenly catapulting into sorrow. Despair alternating with its ecstasy. What is life? It's a medley of all this. It's a kind of flux, as Heraclitus put it. Life goes on like a flux. You can never dip your hand into the same river twice. Why? The moment you stretch your hand, water has flown. The moment your hand reaches the water, again, it's not the same water. That is the way with the life. How well, through the image, Ezra Pound had brought it out. The intensity, the profundity of the image. That was a trend poetry was taking. And these days also, people are writing, youngsters, they write riveting on one experience. And that one experience, the local, becomes the universal. I think that's how the trend now goes. And the youngsters are just giving expression freely. And, they're trying to make it new, their diction. Each one with an indigenous kind of diction, bringing out something new, other than simply going to the stereotype. I am not against orthodox poetry in there. It's lovely when you read Elegy Written in the Churchyard by Gray. Stalwarts there, yes, they have a place of their own. But along with it, in tune, in tandem with the times, we are reinventing it. After all, life itself, our way of living, thinking itself is every day being redefined. Look, we are giving newer and newer dimensions. Likewise, poets are trying these days to bring newness into their writing. That rivets attention.
Right. So, like you said, there are a lot of books and poems being published today thanks to online publishing platforms and on-demand publishing services. But do you think the readership of these books is going up, or is it coming down? What is your take on that?
As I said, when you write with a kind of originality of your own, originality is also a problematic term. Origin is strong in original. The word origin is strong in original. But I would say it's not like a kind of pulp fiction that comes like you feel you're a poet, you don the cap of a poet and you feel like writing on anything and everything, putting into the media and all that. Sometimes that kind of, what surface like poetry also appears. But I would tell when I go for poetry workshops, you need kind of real hard work on what you write. First thing is you have to read and read and read. Observe and observe and observe the extraordinary in the ordinary. Or the kind of relationship that has got its own soft connotations. And when you write, then and there you write and you publish it, you're keen to publish it. Such things, sometimes, I would say, through clever marketing, sometimes it goes. But true poetry, genuine poetry that you were doing with the sweat of your kind of hard work, it stands. People listen. People listen to your voice and say it is unique. You have something to say and I appreciate your take on things. That way it goes. But I am not overlooking the fact that it has become a fad and fashion these days to don the cap of a poet. And so much of that kind of, it's nice. If everybody feels like writing, wonderful, that's nice. But the thing is, a bit of hard work has to go behind it. And you can't just produce it in a flick of a second with a click of a mouse. That's my take on it.
Absolutely. So continuing on that, what is your advice as a writer? What is your advice to a budding writer or a poet or somebody who wants to take up writing as a profession?
first and foremost, I would say, like, observe life and then think of it from the flip side of it, Not that, everything has got another side. See, everything, just like Einstein's theory of relativity went on, everything is relative. So from one stand, let us not be judgmental. Look at the other side. There is a famous movie, Life is Beautiful, where the hero is Mohanlal. He's a professor teaching students. Now students, look at it from this angle, it has one shape. Look at it from another angle, another shape. That is cubism also, cubist painting. One angle you look at it, the picture has that meaning. So give a wide berth to opinion, people, things. And then think of what you feel about it. Be genuine. That is it. That is a kind of right observation. Even in the ordinary, you can find something extraordinary if you go that way. Again, as I told you earlier, writing, you have to evolve on your own style. Don't simply think, simply because I moved as a cloud, Wordsworth wrote. So you also start the poem the same way. I observed that. Don't simply fall in for imitation. When it comes from your heart, it takes an idiom of its own, your own. As I told you, in the campus youth in Kenya, each one had a different way of utterance and different way of putting choice words together. It comes to us through reading, through observation, through practice. Read, and read. That is the first and foremost thing. Whether it be you are listening to it with your earphone, whatever. But I think reading really matters. Reading makes a perfect man, a perfect writer. This is what I tell my group of students also who are interested. And there are any number of, to my surprise, I believe, these are days when they have time for real reading, good poetry. And their comments also, as I tell them, don't think that simply because you write only you become a poet. No. These are days, a poem is opening up dimensions for you. You are getting into the pores left by it, unfinished edges, and you are giving a critique of it. You are also a creator. You create it. That is it. So that way, through reading good poems, analyzing it, you grow into a writer. You grow into a poet. And after all, it's a very good experience, isn't it? I tell them, make it a point. You write something down in your diary every day. How the day was for you. What all you felt. I mean, not for publication, but later at a point in your life, you flick the pages, leaf over the pages, and then you find, oh, those days. This was my mindset. These were my dreams. These were the hurdles I had come across. It is a very good recap on yourself. So make it that way. And so many students started that way. And their chronicles and their journals or whatever, later they could change it to good writing. These are all small tips I would just advise the novices in this area.
Absolutely, but very practical tips, nevertheless. So, ma'am, coming to your current, your writing projects, what are your current projects and when will you publish them? Can you give us an idea?
Yeah. As I told you, my first poem was by poetry book was by Patridge publication by Penguin.
Yes.
Afterwards, I came across a wonderful publisher in New Delhi, Sudarshan Kechari. And he said, ma'am, I'm interested in publishing. To come across the right publisher matters a lot these days. He himself is a poet and a philosopher and a thinker and all. So he could gauge it. And he was bringing out one book after another by me, and 14 books out of 2 only went to Palakkad. In Kerala, there is another wonderful publisher, Gopal Kumar, Express Publications. I came up with a Malayalam novel translation, Hidimbi. That is also a very important thing I did, because Hidimbi is a marginalized character in Mahabharata. Bhima marries her for convenience. just to win the support of his group for the war. But she loves him sincerely, and her love was taken for granted. That attracted me. Marginalized womanhood, taken for granted. So I thought it was written by Vinay Sri, one Malayalam novelist. She writes wonderfully well. That I translated, and another work was done by Gopakumar Radhakrishnan, Express Publications. But the rest of them, 12 poetry books, are from New Delhi Authors Press. And even now, my latest, and even this book, Adventures of Dillu Dillu, everything he did. And you feel enormous satisfaction because when the book ultimately comes as a product in your hand, you feel, beyond these mountains. What happened? Oh, my video was off. 1 minute. Unknowingly, it's okay now. So this book, the latest, for which Asian Literary Society made it the best book, English poetry book of the year, Beyond Mixed Mountains. So the cover page, everything came out so well. And now my latest book is Songs of Silence. It is there, which will be published in February, this month. And I'm working on a novel, which is more or less an autobiographical thing, my trajectory of my life. And it is dealing mainly with old age, when you grow old. I mean, not only mine, there are other characters, their lives intertwined. What all are the special, cornered areas of yours? Social, because these days old age homes are coming in a great number. So what is lacking? What is there as a bliss? What is there as a kind of depravity? What society is denying these old people are? It is a dominant concern of mine. So that is on the anvil, my novel. And every day, one thing or other, when it strikes me, I do write and post it. And any number of anthologies, it is coming up on women, marginalized women, or on nature, exploitation of nature. So many themes are there. That way, my poetic, this thing goes on. And I wanted to highlight one thing, just like somebody asked me in an interview, there is a literary voice, a major journal coming out from Canada. They had an interview with me. Ultimately, what is your goal as a poet? I said, no, I don't dream high or whatever. I don't have that. But as a human being, as somebody said, such a person walked on earth. Einstein was speaking about Bapu. It is difficult to believe that such a person in flesh and blood walked on the surface of this earth. We all, in our own individual ways, are making our presence in this earth's surface. And the moment when we are gone, like a rainbow, let there be a tangerine trail left behind. You look at the rainbow and it has disappeared already. But there is a kind of purple tangerine kind of trail behind these things. That is the only thing that I want to leave behind through my books, through my writing. There was a person who looked at life that way. There was a person who had her soft corner that way. She focused on these and these, which so many others didn't focus on. You leave such a tangerine trail. I think that is my minimal. I think it's not an ambitious thing, just to keep some books in memory of a person who walked on the earth's surface once upon a time with a perspective take of her own. Anita.
Right, ma'am. Thank you so much. I would love to speak more about this because your writings are really lucid, really beautiful, so inspiring. I wish we could go on, but then we're running out of time.
I know.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking the time to speak to me. Thank you so much.